The silence that hung over the forward operating base at Vanguard Point was shattered by the rhythmic thump of helicopter rotors as dawn broke over the mountain ridge. Beneath the concrete bunkers and behind reinforced walls, an elite counter-terrorism unit prepared for their morning briefing, their faces grin with determination and focus. But it was the unexpected arrival at the command center that caught everyone's attention. Captain Alexandra "Alex" Reeves, whose reputation had preceded her in ways she'd never wanted. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Intel suggests hostage movement along the southern corridor, Commander Jackson announced, his voice carrying across the tactical operations room where battle-hardened operators stood reviewing satellite imagery. We need immediate action plans for potential extraction scenarios. Lieutenant Martinez looked up from the tactical display, his eyes narrowing at the sight of Captain Reeves standing quietly near the back wall. "Sir, is the captain joining tactical response?" he asked, making little effort to hide his skepticism. Commander Jackson nodded curtly. Captain Reeves will be observing our operation protocols as part of her reassignment from Strategic Command. A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. Everyone present knew the stories, how Captain Alexandra Reeves had been removed from field operations after what they called the Karachi incident, how she'd reportedly broken down during the high-stakes extraction, how her emotional response had supposedly compromised the mission, though the official reports remained classified. "Observer status only," Lieutenant Martinez muttered to Sergeant Willis as they returned to the tactical display. "Probably for the best. Last thing we need is someone falling apart when decisions need to be made." Captain Reeves heard the comment, but gave no indication. She'd grown accustomed to the whispers, the sideways glances, the assumptions. Her reassignment to Vanguard Point was just another stop in what had become a nomadic career, moved from unit to unit, always watching, never belonging. The combat medal pinned to her chest told one story. The rumors circulating about her told another. Throughout the briefing, Alex remained silent, her gray-green eyes taking in every detail of the operational plans, the team dynamics, the command structure. She noted inefficiencies in their extraction protocols, but said nothing. This wasn't her unit, and her opinions weren't welcome, not anymore. As the meeting concluded, Commander Jackson approached her. "Captain, my office at 1400 hours. We should discuss your observations." "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice calm and professional. The commander studied her for a moment, as if trying to reconcile the composed officer before him with the stories he'd heard. In the mess hall later that morning, Alex sat alone, reviewing mission parameters on her tablet while picking at a breakfast she had little appetite for. The Special Forces operators at nearby tables made no effort to include her, their conversations dropping to hushed tones whenever she passed by. "That's her, Reeves," she overheard Corporal Diaz saying to a newer team member. "They say she cracked during the Karachi operation. Too emotional to make the hard calls." "Doesn't look unstable to me," the younger operator replied, studying Alex from across the room. "Trust me, you don't want someone like that watching your back when things go sideways. Give me someone who thinks with their head, not their heart." Alex maintained her focus on her tablet, years of practice having taught her to block out such comments. The truth of what happened in Karachi was far more complex than the rumors suggested, but she'd stopped trying to correct the narrative long ago. Let them believe what they wanted. Her job now was to observe and advise, nothing more. The morning training exercises offered Alex her first close look at the unit's capabilities. From her position on the observation platform, she watched as the operators ran through building clearance drills with mechanical precision. Their movements were textbook, their communication minimal but effective. Technically proficient, but something was missing. Lieutenant Martinez approached after the exercises concluded, professional courtesy overriding his personal reservations. "Any observations, Captain?" Alex considered her response carefully. "Your team moves well through the structures. Very efficient, but?" Martinez prompted, hearing the unspoken qualification in her tone. "The hostage scenarios are being treated as secondary objectives rather than mission-critical priorities," she said simply. "In a real scenario, civilian protection would need to be the primary focus." Martinez's expression hardened slightly. "With all due respect, Captain, in a combat zone, eliminating threats is what keeps both operators and civilians alive. Emotional attachment to hostages gets people killed." The irony of his statement wasn't lost on Alex, but she merely nodded. "Of course, Lieutenant. Just an observation. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." As she turned to leave, Martinez called after her. "Captain, I'm curious, what really happened in Karachi?" The reports were vague. Alex paused, her back still to him. "The official record stands, Lieutenant." "I'm sure you've read it." "I've read it. I'm not sure I believe it." She turned, meeting his gaze directly for the first time. "Sometimes what looks like emotion from the outside is actually clarity from within. Good day, Lieutenant." The cryptic response left Martinez watching her retreating figure with newfound curiosity. There was something about Captain Reeves that didn't align with her reputation, a steadiness, a focus that contradicted everything he'd heard. In Commander Jackson's office that afternoon, Alex delivered her assessment of the morning exercises. With clinical precision, highlighting strengths and identifying potential improvements without a hint of the emotional instability her reputation suggested. "Your analysis is thorough, Captain," Jackson acknowledged, leaning back in his chair. "Though I sense you're holding something back." Alex hesitated. "Permission to speak freely, sir." "Granted. Your team is technically excellent, but they're training for combat, not rescue. If your mission parameters shift to a hostage scenario, they may struggle to adapt their priorities accordingly." Jackson studied her for a long moment. Interesting observation from someone who supposedly couldn't separate emotion from duty in Karachi. Alex met his gaze evenly. "The official record speaks for itself, sir, does it?" Jackson opened a folder on his desk, her personnel file, she realized. "Because what I see here is a decorated officer with an impeccable record until one classified incident that resulted in her being shuffled between observation roles." He closed the file. "Seems like there's more to the story." "Perhaps there is, sir, but revisiting it won't change my current assignment." Jackson nodded slowly. "Fair enough, Captain. For now, continue your observations. The team could benefit from a fresh perspective, regardless of its source." As days passed at Vanguard Point, Alex settled into a rhythm of watchful assessment. She observed training exercises, reviewed mission protocols, and offered occasional suggestions that were met with varying degrees of receptiveness. Some, like Sergeant Willis, began to acknowledge the value of her tactical insights. Others, particularly Lieutenant Martinez, maintained their distance and their doubts. During a nighttime extraction exercise, Alex noticed a critical flaw in the team's approach. As they prepared to debrief, she approached Commander Jackson. "Sir, there's an issue with the rear security positioning during hostage movement. It creates a vulnerability that could be exploited in an actual combat situation." Jackson considered this. "Show me." Using the tactical display, Alex demonstrated the problem, her fingers moving confidently over the 3D terrain model. "If hostiles approached from this ridgeline while the team is focused on the primary extraction point, the civilian protection detail would be isolated and vulnerable." Jackson studied the scenario, then nodded. "You're right. Good catch, Captain." He turned to the assembled team. Adjust the rear security protocols according to Captain Reeves' assessment. The acknowledgement was small but significant. The first time her input had been directly implemented rather than merely noted. She felt Lieutenant Martinez's eyes on her as she stepped back from the display. Later that evening, as Alex was reviewing simulation data in the quiet of the Tactical Operations Center, Martinez approached her workstation. "That was a solid call on the security positioning," he said, the admission clearly difficult for him. "Thank you, Lieutenant." Martinez hesitated, then pulled up a chair. "I've been reviewing your service record, the parts that aren't classified anyway. 3 Purple Hearts, the Silver Star, multiple successful extractions in hostile territory. Doesn't sound like someone who falls apart under pressure." Alex continued reviewing her data, her expression unchanged. "People contain multitudes, Lieutenant. Sometimes they're more complex than their reputation suggests." "So what really happened in Karachi?" he pressed. "Off the record." She finally looked up from her screen. "Why does it matter to you?" "Because something doesn't add up. And in our line of work, things that don't add up can get people killed." Alex was saved from responding by the sudden blaring of the base alarm system. Red emergency lights began flashing throughout the facility as the intercom crackled to life. "All personnel, alert status Alpha. Repeat, alert status Alpha. Command staff report to talk immediately." Alex and Martinez exchanged glances before rushing to the Tactical Operations Center. Whatever had triggered the alert, it was serious. Alpha status was reserved for imminent threats or critical intelligence developments. As they entered the talk, Commander Jackson was already receiving information through his secure communications link, his expression growing increasingly grave. Around him, intelligence officers were rapidly updating situation displays with incoming satellite imagery and field reports. "What's happening, sir?" Martinez asked as they approached. Jackson looked up, his face grim. "Hostage situation at the International Relief Agency compound in Makadar. Initial reports indicate approximately 200 aid workers and local staff are being held by armed militants. The situation is deteriorating rapidly." Alex felt a chill run through her. Makadar was a small city just 30 kilometers from their position, close enough for immediate response, but far enough to present significant tactical challenges. And 200 hostages meant an extraordinarily complex extraction scenario. "Do we have eyes on the compound?" she asked, professional instinct overriding her observer status. Jackson nodded toward the main display where satellite imagery was being updated in real time. Initial drone footage coming in now. The room fell silent as the first images appeared on screen. The compound, normally a bustling center for humanitarian operations, had been transformed into a fortress. Armed militants patrolled the perimeter, while terrified civilians could be seen gathered in the central courtyard. "Hostiles are estimated at 30 to 40 combatants, heavily armed," reported the intelligence officer. "They've established defensive positions at all major access points and have wired the perimeter with what appear to be improvised explosive devices." "Demands?" Martinez asked. "They're calling for the release of political prisoners and safe passage to the Northern Territories," Jackson replied. "Government has already refused. They've given the militants 24 hours before they'll consider a military solution." Everyone in the room understood what that meant. A frontal assault that would likely result in significant civilian casualties. "Sir," Martinez said, "request permission to begin planning an extraction operation." Jackson nodded grimly, already approved from higher up. "This is now our mission. Lieutenant, assemble your planning team." His eyes fell on Alex. "Captain Reeves, given your experience with hostage scenarios, I'd like your input as well." Martinez looked as though he might object but held his tongue. The situation was too dire for personal reservations. As the tactical team assembled around the planning table, Alex felt a familiar focus settling over her. This wasn't her first hostage crisis, and despite the rumors about Karachi, hostage extraction had once been her specialty. She studied the compound layout, the positions of the hostages, the militant patrol patterns, seeing possibilities where others might see only obstacles. Standard approach would be a coordinated strike through these 3 access points, Martinez began, indicating positions on the digital map. Simultaneous breach, clear the hostiles, secure the hostages. Alex shook her head slightly. With respect, Lieutenant, that approach prioritizes combatant engagement over civilian safety. In a space this confined, with this many hostages, the risk of collateral casualties would be unacceptably high. What's the alternative? Martinez challenged. We can't exactly knock on the front door. Actually, Alex said quietly, that's precisely what I'm suggesting. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to her. Explain, Captain, Commander Jackson prompted. Alex moved to the tactical display, her movements decisive. The militants are expecting a military assault. It's why they fortified these positions and established these fields of fire. But they're not prepared for a humanitarian negotiation team. You want to walk in there and talk to them? Martinez asked incredulously. I want them to think that's what we're doing, Alex clarified. A small team posing as relief agency negotiators gains entry through the main gate. Once inside, they can assess the exact positions of all hostages and hostiles, disable the perimeter, explosives from within, and coordinate with a secondary team for targeted extraction. That's an enormous risk, Jackson said, though his tone suggested he was considering the approach. If they realize it's a military deception, the first team would be completely exposed, Alex acknowledged. But it creates our best chance of extracting all 200 hostages with minimal casualties. Who would lead such a team? Sergeant Willis asked. Before anyone could respond, Alex straightened. I would, sir. Lieutenant Martinez stared at her. Captain, with all due respect, given your history, my history is precisely why I should lead it. Alex interrupted, her voice steady. I've conducted similar operations in Mosul, Sarajevo, and yes, Karachi. Whatever you've heard about that mission, the fact remains that we extracted all primary targets with 0 civilian casualties. At what cost? Martinez pressed. Alex met his gaze unflinchingly. Every cost worth paying, Lieutenant. Commander Jackson studied her for a long moment, weighing factors only he fully understood. Finally, he nodded. Captain Reeves will lead the primary infiltration team. Lieutenant Martinez will command the secondary extraction force. I want a full operational plan in 3 hours. As the planning session intensified, Alex found herself fully in her element for the first time since arriving at Vanguard Point. The observer had become the operator, and with that transition came a clarity and purpose that had been missing during her months of administrative exile. Working alongside the tactical team, she helped develop a comprehensive extraction plan that balanced the need for deception with the reality of combat readiness. Every contingency was considered, every potential failure point addressed. Throughout the process, she displayed not the emotional instability her reputation suggested, but a calculated precision born of experience. The primary team will consist of myself and 2 operators who can pass as humanitarian workers, she explained as the plan took shape. We'll approach under the guise of delivering medical supplies and opening negotiation channels. Once inside, Martinez continued, having gradually accepted the approach. They'll gather intelligence, locate all hostage groups, and begin disabling perimeter defenses while my team moves into position here and here. He indicated points on the tactical map. As midnight approached, the final operational briefing began. The full extraction team, 20 operators divided between the infiltration and assault elements, gathered to review their roles and synchronize their movements. The tension in the room was palpable. Everyone understood the stakes. This is a complex operation with significant risks, Commander Jackson acknowledged. But we have 200 civilians counting on us to bring them home safely. Captain Reeves will lead the infiltration team. Lieutenant Martinez will command the extraction force. This mission has been designated Operation Steadfast Mercy. As the briefing concluded and the teams began final preparations, Lieutenant Martinez approached Alex as she was checking her communications equipment. "Captain," he began, his voice low, "I need to know something before we deploy." Alex looked up, recognizing the seriousness in his tone. "Go ahead, Lieutenant. In Karachi, when they say you became emotional, what really happened?" Alex was silent for a moment, weighing how much to reveal. Finally, she spoke. "The official report says I compromised the mission by prioritizing civilian safety over operational security. And the truth? The truth is I refused an order to proceed with an extraction that would have sacrificed 12 local children to secure 3 high-value targets," she said quietly. "I found another way, one that saved everyone, but required disobeying. A direct command. The mission succeeded, but my career ended." Martinez processed this. "You were punished for saving more lives?" "I was punished for insubordination," Alex corrected. "In our world, Lieutenant, chain of command matters. I broke it. Would you do it again?" Alex didn't hesitate, every time. Martinez nodded slowly, a new understanding dawning. "I'll see you in the field, Captain." As darkness settled over Vanguard Point, the extraction teams made their final preparations. Alex changed from her military uniform into the plain clothes of a humanitarian worker, removing all signs of her military identity. As she tucked a concealed sidearm into her waistband, covered by a loose-fitting aid worker's vest, Commander Jackson entered the preparation room. "Captain," he said quietly, "I've just received updated intelligence from command. The situation in Makadar has deteriorated. The militants have executed 2 hostages as a demonstration of their resolve." Alex absorbed this grim news with a steady gaze. "All the more reason to move quickly, sir," Jackson nodded. "There's something else you should know. General Harrington has taken personal interest in this operation." The name sent a chill through Alex. General Harrington had been the commanding officer who'd ordered her removal from field operations after Karachi. His involvement now couldn't be coincidence. "I see," she said carefully. "Has he expressed any concerns about the operational plan?" "He suggested a more conventional approach might be preferable," Jackson admitted, "given the high-profile nature of the crisis." "And your response, sir?" "I informed him that I had full confidence in the plan and its leader." Jackson held her gaze. "Prove me right, Captain." As the infiltration team prepared to depart, Sergeant Willis, who would be accompanying Alex into the compound, approached with a question that had been bothering many of the operators. "Captain, I need to ask, if things go sideways in there, if we're compromised?" "We'll adapt and overcome, Sergeant," Alex replied, checking her concealed communication device one final time. "That's what we're trained to do." "With respect, ma'am, that's not what I'm asking. The rumors about Karachi say when pressure hit maximum, you couldn't make the hard call. If we're in there and it comes down to a no-win scenario." Alex stopped her preparations and turned to face Willis directly. "Sergeant, let me be very clear. What happened in Karachi was not a failure to make hard choices. It was a refusal to accept that only hard choices existed." Her voice remained calm, but carried an intensity that silenced the room. "Today, 200 lives depend on our ability to see possibilities where others see only obstacles. That's why I'm leading this team. Not despite Karachi, but because of it." The conviction in her voice left no room for doubt, and Willis nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Understood, Captain. We're with you." As the infiltration team loaded into an unmarked vehicle disguised as a medical relief transport, Lieutenant Martinez approached for a final coordination. "We'll be in position within 30 minutes of your entry," he confirmed. "Just give the signal." Alex nodded. "Remember, Lieutenant, this isn't about how many hostiles we eliminate. It's about how many hostages walk out alive." Martinez held her gaze for a moment, then offered his hand. "Good hunting, Captain. We'll be ready when you call." As the disguised vehicle pulled away from Vanguard Point under the cover of darkness, Alex felt a familiar calm settling over her, the focused clarity that had once made her one of the most effective extraction specialists in the service. Whatever doubts others might harbor about her capabilities, she had none about herself. Not anymore. The road to Makadar stretched before them, leading toward 200 civilians whose lives now hung in the balance. Behind them, an extraction team prepared to respond to their signal. And somewhere, watching from a distance, General Harrington waited to see if Alexandra Reeves would finally break, or prove once and for all why emotion, properly channeled, might be the most powerful weapon in a rescuer's arsenal. The judgment that had followed her since Karachi was about to be tested in the crucible of combat once more. This time, however, Alex wasn't fighting just to save hostages. She was fighting to reclaim her identity as a soldier who understood that compassion and courage were not opposing forces, but complementary ones. The mission that lay ahead would either vindicate her approach or confirm the whispers that had shadowed her for years. Either way, by dawn, the truth would be known. The road to Makadar wound through darkened valleys, the infiltration team's vehicle maintaining a steady pace despite the growing tension. Captain Alexandra Reeves sat silently in the passenger seat, her mind focused on the mission parameters, while Sergeant Willis drove and Corporal Rodriguez, their communication specialist, monitored encrypted channels from the back seat. All three were dressed as humanitarian workers, their military identities hidden beneath civilian clothes and carefully crafted cover stories. "Approaching Checkpoint 1, Willis murmured as headlights appeared on the road ahead. "Military presence, not militants." Alex nodded. "Remember, we're relief workers responding to the crisis. Let me do the talking." The government checkpoint was manned by nervous local soldiers who examined their credentials with suspicious eyes. Alex presented herself as Dr. Sarah Winters, a medical coordinator with International Relief Coalition, her demeanor shifting subtly, less commanding, more earnestly concerned. "We've been asked to establish communication with the compound," she explained to the checkpoint commander. "Medical supplies for the hostages, opening dialogue for potential release of the injured." The commander frowned. "Very dangerous. The militants have already killed 2 people. "That's why medical assistance is urgent," Alex replied, her voice conveying compassionate determination rather than military authority. "We can't stand by while more innocent people suffer." After a tense moment, the commander waved them through. "Your courage is admirable, but perhaps foolish," he said as they passed. "May Allah protect you." Once beyond the checkpoint, Rodriguez let out a breath. "That was close. Thought he might turn us back." "He considered it," Alex said, her eyes scanning the darkened landscape ahead. "But desperation creates opportunity. They have no better options, so they're willing to let us try." As they approached the outskirts of Makadar, the true scale of the crisis became apparent. Military vehicles blocked major roads, while frightened civilians huddled in makeshift evacuation centers. Local police maintained a perimeter approximately 1 kilometer from the compound, beyond which lay uncertain danger. "Final comes check," Alex instructed as they slowed at the last security cordon. Rodriguez verified their concealed equipment. Subdermal communication implants, virtually undetectable to standard searches, which would allow them to maintain contact with the extraction team. "System operational, Captain," he confirmed quietly. "Martinez reports his team is in position at the designated staging points." The police captain in charge of the outer perimeter approached their vehicle, his expression a mixture of surprise and concern when Alex explained their mission. The militants have refused all communication attempts, he warned. They shoot at drones, threaten to execute more hostages if military forces approach. What makes you think they'll talk to you? Because we're bringing what they need, Alex replied, gesturing to the medical supplies in their vehicle. And because sometimes human connection can succeed where force fails. The captain studied her face. You believe this truly? What he couldn't know was that Alex's apparent idealism masked a calculated military assessment. The supplies were real, but also contained concealed tactical equipment. The humanitarian approach wasn't naive hope, it was strategic deception. I have to believe it, she answered. Otherwise, 200 people have no chance. After radioing his superiors, the captain reluctantly allowed them through. May God go with you, he said, stepping back from the vehicle. You are either very brave or very foolish. As they drove the final kilometer toward the compound, Willis glanced at Alex. Which is it, Captain? Brave or foolish? Neither, she replied, her focus unwavering. Just necessary. The compound loomed ahead, once a symbol of humanitarian aid transformed into a fortress of fear. Spotlights illuminated the main entrance where armed militants maintained watchful positions. The IRC vehicle approached slowly, headlights on. A white flag visible through the windshield. This is where it gets real, Rodriguez murmured, tension evident in his voice despite his training. Alex's response was calm, measured. Focus on your role. Remember, we're not here as soldiers. Not yet. As they stopped 30 meters from the main gate, a loudspeaker crackled with a warning in the local dialect, followed by English. Advance. No further. Identify yourselves immediately. Alex took a deep breath, centering herself before opening the door and stepping out, hands clearly visible. My name is Dr. Sarah Winters with International Relief Coalition, she called out. We've brought medical supplies for the hostages and are authorized to open dialogue regarding humanitarian concerns. Long seconds passed as armed figures conferred behind the gate. Finally, a man with a scarred face and an assault rifle approached, flanked by 2 guards. You have courage coming here, he said, his accent thick but English understandable. How? Do we know you are not military spies? Check our credentials, Alex replied, slowly reaching for her falsified identification. Contact the IRC headquarters if you wish to verify. We're medical professionals, not soldiers. The militant leader studied her face intently, as if trying to see beyond her calm exterior. Many children inside need medicine, he finally said. Many wounded. You bring these things truly? See for yourself. Alex gestured toward their vehicle where Willis and Rodriguez waited with the supplies. Basic medicines, bandages, antibiotics. Humanitarian aid is neutral. We help all who suffer. After a tense inspection of their vehicle and supplies, during which Alex maintained her cover persona with unwavering conviction, the militant leader made his decision. You may enter with supplies, but we watch every movement. Any trick, any signal to military outside, and hostages die immediately. Understand? Completely, Alex assured him, her expression conveying sincere concern rather than the tactical assessment happening behind her eyes. CapCut voice ready text. We're here to help, nothing more. As the gates opened and they drove slowly into the compound, Alex activated her subdermal communicator with a practiced motion that appeared to be merely adjusting her collar. Phase 1 complete, she subvocalized, entering target area now. Inside the compound, the humanitarian crisis was immediately apparent. Hundreds of terrified civilians, aid workers, local staff, even children from a nearby school who had been visiting. When the attack occurred, were gathered in the central courtyard, surrounded by armed militants. Medical conditions were clearly deteriorating. Many showed signs of dehydration and stress, while others nursed injuries from the initial takeover. The militant leader, who identified himself only as Kadir, directed them to set up in what had in the compound's medical office. You treat most serious first, he instructed, then children. Of course, Alex agreed, already mentally mapping the compound layout, identifying guard positions, cataloging weapons and defensive measures. Her medical training, part of her special operations background, allowed her to maintain cover while her military mind processed tactical information as they unloaded supplies. Willis whispered, 14 guards visible in the courtyard. 4 more on the perimeter wall. Heavy weapons positioned at north and east corners. Acknowledged, Alex murmured while arranging medical equipment. Rodriguez, status of communication systems? Functional, he confirmed quietly. Martinez reports. Extraction team is holding at designated positions, awaiting our signal. For the next 2 hours, Alex and her team performed their cover roles flawlessly, providing genuine medical assistance to the most vulnerable hostages while gathering critical intelligence. With each patient treated, each area of the compound they were permitted to access, the tactical picture became clearer. A young woman with an injured arm provided key information while Alex bandaged her wound. They have explosives, she whispered, fear evident in her eyes, at all entrances, and more hostages in the basement level. Important ones, they said. Alex applied a final bandage, her touch gentle despite the intensity of her focus. You're being very brave, she said, loud enough for the guard to hear, then lowered her voice. How many in the basement? Maybe 15. Foreign aid directors, local government officials. This was crucial information. High-value hostages separated from the main group, likely with additional security. Standard terrorist protocol to create leverage and complicate rescue efforts. As night deepened, Alex requested access to more areas of the compound to treat immobile patients. Each granted permission expanded their intelligence gathering, each interaction with hostages building a more complete operational picture. During a brief moment, alone with her team while preparing additional medical supplies, Alex outlined what she'd learned. They've divided leadership hostages to the basement level. Main explosive triggers are centralized with Kadir and his lieutenant. Guard rotations every 30 minutes suggest they're experienced, but fatigue is setting in. Time. Frame for extraction. Willis asked, keeping his voice low. We need approximately 2 more hours to complete compound mapping and disable key security measures, Alex calculated. Optimal window will be 0300 hours when guard alertness typically reaches minimum levels. Rodriguez nodded. And if they discover our true purpose before then? Alex's expression remained calm. Then we accelerate the timeline and adapt the approach. As they continued their medical work, Alex observed subtle but important dynamics among the militant group. Kadir maintained strict authority, but there were visible tensions between factions. Some appeared more hardened and ideological, others more pragmatic, potentially open to negotiation. When Kadir approached her as she treated a child with asthma, Alex recognized an opportunity to exploit these divisions. Your people have training, he observed, watching her administer medication with practiced ease. Military? Humanitarian missions in conflict zones, Alex replied truthfully, though omitting the military context of those missions. I've worked in many war-torn regions. Kadir studied her. Then you understand. Sometimes violence is the only language governments comprehend. I understand suffering, Alex countered carefully, and that it rarely solves anything. Pretty words, he scoffed, though something in his expression suggested her response had resonated. Reality is different, is it? Alex ventured, maintaining her cover while pursuing a potential psychological advantage. These hostages, they aren't your real enemies. They came to help your people, just as I have. Kadir's expression hardened. You know nothing of our struggle. I know that whatever your cause, harming innocents undermines it, she replied, her voice calm but resolute. History remembers those who show mercy more favorably than those who show only cruelty. The militant leader stared at her for a long moment. Finish your work, doctor. Dawn approaches, and with it, decisions must be made. As he walked away, Willis approached under the pretense of delivering supplies. Taking a risk, engaging him that way, he murmured. Creating options, Alex corrected. If we can sow doubt, exploit divisions among them, we might not need to rely solely on force. 3 hours into their infiltration, a critical moment arrived when one of the guards began taking particular interest in Rodriguez's movements, watching suspiciously as he treated patients near the compound's western wall, where he'd been. Systematically disabling the improvised, explosive devices during his rounds, Alex recognized the danger immediately and created a diversion. Calling urgently for assistance with a patient experiencing a seizure, in reality, a hostage she'd quietly instructed to fake symptoms. In the ensuing commotion, Rodriguez completed his task undetected, neutralizing the final western perimeter explosive. West sector clear, he confirmed subvocally when they regrouped. Extraction route viable through maintenance access point identified on building schematics. The infiltration team had now been inside the compound for nearly 5 hours. Dawn was approaching, bringing with it increased risk as fatigue and tension wore on both hostages and hostage-takers. Through careful maneuvering, they had successfully mapped the entire compound, identified all hostage locations, neutralized key defensive measures, and established potential extraction routes. It was time for the operation's most critical phase. Martinez. Alex subvocalized into her communicator during a moment of privacy. Infiltration complete. Prepare for coordinated extraction on my signal. 200 hostages confirmed, including 15 high-value targets in basement level. Primary extraction route will be west maintenance access, secondary through north emergency exit. Acknowledged, came the lieutenant's response. Extraction. Teams in position, awaiting your signal. The plan was set, but as Alex emerged from the makeshift treatment area, an unexpected complication arose. Kadir was engaged in a heated argument with his lieutenant, their voices escalating as they gestured toward the hostages. Time has passed. The lieutenant shouted in their native language, which Alex understood from her intelligence training. Government ignores our demands. We must show them we are serious. Execute more hostages now. Kadir hesitated, glancing toward where Alex stood. The doctor said, "The doctor means nothing." The lieutenant spat. "Only blood will make them listen." Alex realized the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The operation timeline needed to accelerate before more hostages were executed. She made a swift decision, activating her communicator, while appearing to check a patient's pulse. Martinez, initiation immediate. Hostile elements preparing to execute hostages. Deploy extraction teams now. West and north entry points confirmed clear. Roger, came the terse reply. Teams moving. 3 minutes to position. Those 3 minutes suddenly became the most critical of the entire operation. Alex needed to prevent hostage executions while maintaining her cover until the extraction teams were in position. She approached Kadir and his lieutenant, her demeanor still that of a humanitarian worker, despite the tactical calculations racing through her mind. There's a situation, she said, manufacturing concern. Several patients are showing signs of acute respiratory distress. Possible contagion. I need to isolate them immediately. The lieutenant glared at her suspiciously. This is trick. There is no sickness. Are you a medical professional? Alex challenged, allowing urgency to color her voice. These symptoms developed in the last hour. If it's what I suspect, it could spread to everyone in the compound, including your men. Kadir looked uncertain. What sickness? Possibly a severe influenza variant. I've seen it in refugee camps, spreads rapidly in contained spaces like this. I need to move the affected patients to the west section for isolation. The lieutenant grabbed her arm roughly. No movement of hostages. This is deception. Alex met his gaze steadily, allowing genuine concern to show. Prevent me from containing this, and by tomorrow, your own men could be incapacitated. Is that what you want? The momentary distraction worked. As the militant leaders argued about her warning, Alex signaled Willis and Rodriguez to prepare the hostages nearest to the western extraction point, whispering urgent instructions under the guise of medical assessments. Extraction team approaching west access, she told them quietly. When you hear the signal, move as many people as possible toward that point. Priority on children and injured. Just as the lieutenant seemed about to reject her warning entirely, the first sounds of the extraction operation became audible. Precisely calibrated diversionary explosions at the compound's eastern perimeter, the opposite direction from the actual entry points. Kadir and his lieutenant reacted instantly, shouting orders to their men who rushed toward the perceived threat. In that crucial moment of confusion, Alex dropped her humanitarian persona entirely, her movements shifting from medical professional to combat operator in the space of a heartbeat. Now, she commanded Willis and Rodriguez, who immediately shed their own cover identities. Extraction is live. Secure the hostages, move them to the west access point. The compound erupted into controlled chaos as the extraction team breached through the west maintenance access, precisely as planned. Lieutenant Martinez led the first element, his operators moving with disciplined efficiency through the predetermined routes that Alex's team had mapped during their infiltration. East. Sector secure, came Martinez's voice through the communicator. Moving to central courtyard. Alex was already directing hostages toward the extraction routes, her command presence leaving no room for panic or hesitation, despite the sounds of combat erupting around the compound perimeter. Move quickly but orderly, she instructed, helping an elderly woman to her feet. Follow the operators in black uniforms. They'll lead you to safety. When armed militants appeared at the courtyard entrance, Alex didn't hesitate. She drew her concealed sidearm and fired with precision, neutralizing the threat before it could endanger the evacuating hostages. Willis and Rodriguez similarly engaged hostile elements, their actions now fully aligned with their true identities as elite operators. "Captain," Willis called out, gesturing toward the administrative building. "The basement hostages." Alex nodded sharply. "Cover the main evacuation. I'll secure the high-value targets." She activated her communicator. "Martinez, primary evacuation. Proceeding through west access. I'm moving to secure basement hostages with specialized team." Acknowledged, Martinez replied through sounds of controlled engagement. The advised, hostile forces converging on administrative building. Alex signaled to two operators from the extraction team. "With me. Basement level, southwest stairwell. 15 hostages, unknown number of hostiles." The administrative building was eerily quiet compared to the controlled chaos of the main compound, but Alex knew this was where the greatest danger lay. The most valuable hostages would be the most heavily guarded, and potentially the first targeted for execution if the militants felt their position was lost. Moving with practiced precision, Alex led her small team through the darkened corridors toward the basement access. At the stairwell, they encountered the first resistance, two militants rushing upward, weapons raised. Alex engaged without hesitation, her shots finding their marks with the efficiency that had once made her legendary among extraction specialists. "Clear," she confirmed, continuing downward. "Stay alert. They'll prioritize eliminating high-value hostages if they believe the compound is lost." At the basement level, voices became audible, urgent, angry commands in the local dialect. Alex recognized Kadir's lieutenant among them, his tone making his intentions clear, even without translation. "Prepare the executives. If we cannot win, they will not survive either." Alex signaled her team to hold position, then made a decision. That drew on the very qualities her critics had once labeled as weaknesses. Instead of launching an immediate tactical assault, she called out in the local language, "Kadir, the compound is secured. Your men are surrendering. There's still a path where no more blood needs to be shed." Silence fell, followed by the lieutenant's angry response, "Who speaks? Show yourself." "You know who I am," Alex replied, maintaining her position. "I came as a doctor, but that was only part of my truth. Now I speak as someone who understands that your cause is not served by murdering hostages who cannot fight back." "You are military," the lieutenant shouted. "You lied to us." "Yes," Alex acknowledged. "Just as you lied to these hostages when you promised they wouldn't be harmed. We all make choices. The question is what choice you will make now." More silence, then Kadir's voice, surprisingly calm. "What choice remains? Surrender your weapons. Release the hostages. I give you my word you will be treated according to international law. Your word means nothing." The lieutenant snarled, "You are deception from beginning." "Not entirely," Alex countered. "I truly did come to prevent unnecessary deaths. That part was never a lie." The tension stretched, seconds feeling like hours as the fate of 15 lives hung in the balance. Then came the sound of argument between Kadir and his lieutenant, heated words exchanged in their native tongue. "Captain," one of her team whispered urgently, "Martinez reports compound nearly secured. Estimated 150 hostages. Already evacuated. Should we breach?" Alex raised her hand for patience, her instincts telling her to wait. The argument inside the room was reaching a crescendo, and then suddenly, gunshots. "Breach now," Alex commanded, but even as her team moved forward, the door opened. Kadir stood there, his weapon lowered, blood spreading across his shoulder. Behind him, his lieutenant lay motionless on the floor, and beyond, the hostages huddled against the far wall, alive but terrified. "You spoke truth about one thing, Doctor," Kadir said wearily. "History remembers mercy. Today, I choose to be remembered differently than him." He nodded toward his fallen lieutenant. Alex maintained her tactical position, but acknowledged his choice with a nod. A wise decision. Within minutes, the basement hostages were secured and moving toward extraction. Kadir in custody but receiving medical treatment for his wound. As Alex led the final group toward the evacuation point, Martinez approached, his expression a mixture of respect and amazement. "Captain," he reported, "all primary hostages secured. Compound fully under control. 0 civilian casualties." Alex nodded, the significance of his report not lost on her. 0 civilian casualties in a hostage situation of this magnitude was nearly unprecedented. "And our team?" she asked. 2 minor injuries, nothing critical." As they emerged from the administrative building, the full scope of the operations success became apparent. Hundreds of rescued hostages were being processed through medical triage points, traumatized but alive. The militant threat had been neutralized with minimal force, many choosing surrender after seeing Kadir's example. The eastern sky was beginning to lighten with the first hints of dawn as Alex watched the final hostages being evacuated. After years of doubt and whispered criticism, she had led arguably the most successful mass hostage extraction in recent military history, not despite her approach, but because of it. Martinez stood beside her, watching the same scene. "You know," he said quietly, "I think I finally understand what happened in Karachi." Alex glanced at him. "Do you?" "You refused to accept that sacrifice was inevitable," he said. "Just like today," she nodded slowly. "Sometimes compassion isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the strength to find a third option when everyone else sees only 2. As emergency vehicles transported the rescued hostages to safety and military units secured the compound, Alex received a communication from Vanguard Point. Commander Jackson's voice came through clearly. Professional, but with an undercurrent of satisfaction. Operation Steadfast Mercy complete. All objectives achieved. Exceptional work, Captain Reeves. A pause then. General Harrington has requested your presence for immediate debriefing upon return. Alex acknowledged the order, uncertain what awaited her back at base. Vindication? Further criticism? After years of being sidelined for her methods, would this success finally silence her detractors? As the extraction teams prepared to return to Vanguard Point, Willis approached her with the respectful demeanor of someone who has witnessed exceptional leadership. Permission to speak freely, Captain. Always, Sergeant. I've served with a lot of officers, ma'am. Never seen anyone handle a situation like you did today. He hesitated, then continued. They said you were too emotional for combat. But what I saw wasn't emotion overriding judgment. It was emotion informing it. Alex considered his words, recognizing the truth in them. Thank you, Sergeant. Sometimes the line between our greatest strengths and our perceived weaknesses is thinner than anyone realizes. As the first full light of dawn illuminated the now secured compound, Alexandra Reeves prepared to face whatever consequences awaited her return. But whatever judgment General Harrington might render, she knew with absolute certainty that 200 lives had been saved by an approach that the conventional military wisdom had once deemed a liability. The rescue at Makadar would soon become a case study in effective hostage extraction, though few would ever know the full truth of how a supposedly emotional captain had transformed a potential tragedy into an unprecedented success. For now it was enough that families would be reunited, that children would return to parents, that lives would continue because she had refused to accept that compassion and tactical excellence were mutually exclusive concepts. As their vehicles prepared to depart, Martinez approached with a final question that had clearly been bothering him throughout the operation. Captain, if Kadur hadn't made the choice he did, if he decided to execute those hostages, what would you have done? Alex met his gaze steadily. Whatever was necessary to save those lives, Lieutenant. Compassion doesn't mean hesitation when action is required. It just means you exhaust every other option first. He nodded, seemingly satisfied with her answer. I think a lot of us had you wrong, Captain. It happens, she replied simply. The important thing is what we do with that realization moving forward. As the extraction team departed from Makadar, leaving the secured compound to regular military forces, Alex knew that regardless of what awaited her at Vanguard Point, her approach to combat leadership had been vindicated in the most meaningful way possible. 200 lives saved, 0 lost. The emotional capacity that had once been deemed her greatest weakness had proven to be her most powerful tactical advantage. The question now was whether the military establishment that had sidelined her would have the wisdom to recognize that fact, or if the prejudice against her methods would persist despite their demonstrable success. Either way, Captain Alexandra Reeves had reclaimed something more important than institutional validation. She had reclaimed her identity as a soldier who refused to accept that effectiveness required emotional detachment, who had proven, definitively, that heart and mind were not opposing forces in combat, but complementary ones. The helicopters landed at Vanguard Point in the harsh light of mid-morning, rotors slowing as the extraction teams disembarked. Captain Alexandra Reeves stepped onto the tarmac, fatigue evident in her movements, but her posture remaining military straight. The base was unusually active, personnel moving with purpose while communications teams coordinated with higher command. News of the successful hostage rescue had clearly preceded their arrival. Commander Jackson waited at the edge of the landing zone, his expression giving nothing away as he approached Alex. Captain, outstanding work in Makadar. The first reports are coming in, all hostages accounted for, minimal casualties among hostile forces, 0 civilian losses. He lowered his voice. General Harrington has arrived personally. He's waiting in the command center. Alex nodded, unsurprised but wary. Thank you, sir. I'll report immediately. Captain, Jackson added as she turned to leave, whatever happens in there, remember what you accomplished today. The implication was clear. Despite the operation's success, Harrington's presence might not signal vindication. Alex appreciated Jackson's subtle support, but kept her expression neutral. The mission results speak for themselves, sir. As she crossed the base toward the command center, Alex became aware of the changed atmosphere. Operators and support. Personnel alike watched her pass, their expressions ranging from curiosity to newfound respect. Word traveled fast in special operations communities, and the details of Makadar were already becoming the stuff of tactical legend. Lieutenant Martinez fell into step beside her. Thought you might want company for the debrief, Captain. Alex glanced at him, surprised by the gesture of solidarity. Not required, Lieutenant. With respect, ma'am, I disagree. His voice was low but determined. What happened out there needs to be reported accurately. By someone who witnessed, if firsthand. She understood then. Martinez wasn't just offering support, he was offering testimony. After years of rumors about Karachi, he wanted to ensure that Makadar was recorded truthfully. Appreciated, Lieutenant, she acknowledged. With a slight nod. The command center hummed with activity as they entered. Intelligence officers compiled after-action data while communications specialists monitored regional developments following the hostage crisis. At the center of it all stood General Richard Harrington, tall, imposing, with the hard-edged demeanor of someone accustomed to unquestioned authority. He turned as Alex approached, his steel-gray eyes revealing nothing of his thoughts. Captain Reeves, he acknowledged curtly. My office now. Martinez stepped forward. Sir, request permission to join the debriefing as tactical lead for the secondary extraction team. Harrington's eyes flicked to the lieutenant. Denied. This is a private assessment, Lieutenant. You'll file your report through standard channels. With respect, General, Martinez began, but Alex subtly shook her head. It's fine, Lieutenant, she said quietly. Compile the team's observations. We'll compare notes afterward. Harrington led her to the base commander's office, which he had apparently appropriated for his visit. Inside, another officer was already waiting, Colonel Rebecca Harris, Harrington's chief of staff and a woman known for her analytical precision and by-the-book approach. Close the door, Captain, Harrington instructed as he took position. Behind the desk. Alex complied, then stood at attention, prepared for whatever assessment or condemnation might follow. At ease, the general said, studying her with calculating eyes. I've reviewed the preliminary reports from Makadar. 200 hostages extracted, 0 civilian casualties. Minimal force applied. Primary hostile leadership captured rather than eliminated, he paused. Remarkably similar outcome to Karachi, wouldn't you say? The comparison wasn't lost on Alex. Similar objectives achieved, sir. Different tactical circumstances, and yet the same. Unconventional approach. Harrington's tone made the word sound like a criticism. You deliberately violated mission parameters by engaging the hostile leadership in negotiation rather than neutralizing the threat. I adapted to changing circumstances, sir. Standard protocol in field operations. Is it? Harrington challenged. Or is it the same emotional decision-making that compromised your effectiveness in Karachi? Alex maintained her composure, though the unfairness of the characterization stung. Sir, with respect, the mission outcomes suggest otherwise. 200 lives saved without loss speaks to effectiveness, not compromise. Colonel Harris interjected, her tone clinically detached. Captain, while the outcomes are indeed impressive, there's concern about the methods employed. You exposed yourself to unnecessary risk by personally engaging with the hostile leader rather than allowing the extraction team to execute a standard tactical solution. The standard tactical solution would have resulted in significant civilian casualties Alex countered evenly. My assessment indicated an alternative approach had higher probability of success with lower collateral damage. Your assessment, Harrington emphasized, was colored by the same emotional attachment to civilian outcomes that led to your removal from field operations after Karachi. The accusation hung in the air, the core of the prejudice that had shadowed Alex for years. Rather than defending herself directly, she shifted approach. General, what is the primary objective of any hostage extraction operation? Harrington's eyes narrowed at the question. To neutralize the threat and secure the targets. With respect, sir, I was taught that the primary objective is to preserve innocent life. Everything else is secondary. Don't lecture me on objectives. Captain, Harrington snapped. I've been running these operations since before you enlisted. Then you know, sir, that success is measured in lives saved, not targets eliminated. Alex maintained eye contact, her voice steady. By that metric, Makadar was an unqualified success, just as Karachi was. Colonel Harris studied her with newfound curiosity. You genuinely believe your approach is superior to established tactical doctrine, don't you? I believe doctrine serves objectives, Colonel, not the other way around. When doctrine fails to serve the primary objective of preserving life, adaptation isn't emotional, it's essential. Harrington leaned forward, his expression hardening. Let me be clear, Captain. Your actions today, while successful, represent a dangerous deviation from established protocol. This kind of freelance decision-making undermines chain of command and creates unpredictable operational variables. Alex had expected this response, but the injustice of it still burned. Hundreds of lives saved, and still her methods were deemed problematic rather than exemplary. Permission to speak freely. Sir? Granted, Harrington replied, though his tone suggested he might regret it. The purpose of military doctrine isn't to enforce conformity, but to provide frameworks for achieving objectives, Alex stated, her conviction evident in every word. When those frameworks become rigid dogma that prevents us from saving lives, we're sworn to protect, we betray our core mission. Careful, Captain, Harrington warned. That borders on insubordination. It's not insubordination to prioritize the lives we're tasked with protecting, sir. It's the highest form of duty. Alex paused, then continued with measured precision. CapCut I voice ready text in Karachi. I disobeyed a direct order because that order would have sacrificed 12 children to extract 3 high-value targets. Today in Makadar, I adapted tactical approach to save 200 lives instead of executing a by-the-book operation that would have resulted in dozens of civilian casualties. She straightened, meeting Harrington's gaze directly. If prioritizing those lives represents a failure of emotional control in your assessment, sir, then I accept that judgment. But the results speak for themselves. Colonel Harris exchanged a glance with Harrington, something unspoken passing between them. Captain, she said carefully, are you aware that your approach in Makadar has already been noticed by Central Command? The Secretary of Defense has personally requested a detailed breakdown of the extraction methodology. This was unexpected. Alex maintained her composure, but surprise must have shown in her expression. What Colonel Harris is saying, Harrington elaborated with evident reluctance, is that your unorthodox methods have attracted attention at levels that complicate my ability to maintain appropriate disciplinary standards. The implication became clear. Political interest in the operation's success was forcing Harrington to reconsider his assessment of Alex's methods, despite his personal disapproval. I don't seek to undermine disciplinary standards, sir, Alex responded carefully, only to achieve the best possible outcomes for those we're tasked with protecting. The office door opened suddenly, Commander Jackson entering with an apologetic nod to Harrington. Excuse the interruption, General, but you'll want to see this. He activated the wall display, which showed international news coverage of the Makadar rescue. The headline was unmistakable. Miracle in Makadar, 200 hostages rescued without casualties. Footage showed freed hostages reuniting with families, many openly weeping with relief. A crawler along the bottom indicated that world leaders were praising the unprecedented humanitarian success of the operation. Harrington's expression tightened as he absorbed the implications. The Makadar rescue wasn't just a tactical success. It was becoming a public relations triumph at the highest levels. "Turn it off," he ordered, and Jackson complied. The commander remained, however, his presence a subtle reminder that others in the chain of command were invested in the outcome of this meeting. After a moment of tense silence, Harrington turned back to Alex. "It appears, Captain, that circumstances have created a situation where your methods require re-evaluation." It wasn't vindication, not truly, but it was the closest thing to acknowledgement she was likely to receive from him. "Colonel Harris will oversee a comprehensive review of the Makadar operation," he continued reluctantly. "Your input will be valuable in understanding the approach that led to today's outcome." Alex recognized the olive branch for what it was, not a personal endorsement from Harrington, but a professional concession to political reality. "I'll provide full cooperation, sir. In the meantime," he added with visible discomfort, "your observer status is terminated, effective immediately. You're being temporarily reassigned to Tactical Development Division as a special consultant on hostage extraction methodology." The significance wasn't lost on her. Not a full restoration to field operations, but a meaningful step away from the professional exile she'd endured since Karachi. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me, Captain," Harrington replied coldly. "Thank the political climate that values appearance over discipline." Dismissed. As Alex left the office, she found Martinez waiting outside, joined by Sergeant Willis and several other operators from the extraction team. Their presence was a silent statement of solidarity that spoke volumes. "Well?" Martinez asked quietly as they walked away from the command center. "I've been reassigned to Tactical Development," Alex replied, still processing the implications herself. "Apparently, my methods warrant further study." Willis couldn't suppress a grin. "Told you, Lieutenant. They couldn't ignore success like Makadar, not when it's all over international news." Martinez nodded thoughtfully. "It's not a full vindication, but it's a start. The brass might not like admitting there's more than one way to run an operation, but they can't argue with results. Like we saw today." As they crossed the base toward the barracks, Alex became aware of changed attitudes among the personnel they passed. Where once there had been whispers and sidelong glances, now there were nods of acknowledgement, even respect. Word of Makadar had spread quickly, transforming her reputation from emotionally compromised to something approaching legendary in the span of a single operation. At the barracks entrance, Commander Jackson caught up with them. "Captain, a moment." Alex nodded to the others to continue without her, then turned to Jackson. "Sir, Harrington's reassignment is temporary," he said without preamble. "Central Command is creating a specialized extraction unit focused on high-risk civilian scenarios. Your name is at the top of their list for potential leadership." She absorbed this information with measured surprise. "That's unexpected, sir, is it?" Jackson challenged. "You just orchestrated the most successful mass hostage extraction in recent military history. The qualities Harrington labeled as liabilities are precisely what Central Command now sees as assets for specific operational contexts." "The General doesn't share that assessment," Alex noted. "The General represents an older doctrine," Jackson replied simply. "But doctrine evolves, Captain. Sometimes it takes dramatic success to drive that evolution." As Jackson departed, Alex stood in the morning sunlight, contemplating the implications of his words. For years, she had carried the burden of Karachi. Like a shadow, her methods deemed compromised by emotion rather than enhanced by it. Now, a single operation had begun to shift that narrative, not through argument or defense, but through undeniable results. Inside the barracks she found her team gathered in the common area, joined by operators from both the infiltration and extraction elements of the Makadar mission. Their conversations fell quiet as she entered, an expectant tension filling the room. "Captain," Rodriguez called out, "we were just discussing the operation. Specifically, how your approach with Qadir created an outcome none of us anticipated." Alex noted the genuine curiosity in his voice, not criticism, but professional interest. "You mean his decision to surrender rather than execute the remaining hostages?" "Exactly," Willis interjected. "Standard doctrine says hostage-takers, backed into a corner, become more dangerous, more likely to execute their captives, but you engaged him differently." "I recognized he wasn't monolithic," Alex explained, taking a seat among them rather than maintaining distance. "During our infiltration, I observed divisions among the leadership. Qadir showed signs of pragmatism that his lieutenant lacked. By appealing to his desire for his cause to be remembered with some measure of dignity rather than only brutality, I offered him a third option beyond fight or die." "That's the part that isn't in any manual," Martinez noted. "The psychological dimension. Seeing hostiles as individuals with complex motivations rather than uniform threats." Alex nodded. "Because they are individuals. Doctrine tends to flatten complexity for operational clarity, which is necessary to a point. But when lives are at stake, recognizing that complexity can create unexpected opportunities." The discussion continued, evolving into an impromptu tactical review as operators shared observations and insights from the mission. What struck Alex most was the shift in tone. Where once her methods would have been dismissed as emotionally compromised, now they were being analyzed as potential tactical innovations. Later that evening, as the base settled into post-mission routines, Alex found a moment of solitude on the observation deck overlooking the training grounds. The day's events had left her physically exhausted but mentally alert, processing the remarkable shift in her professional standing that Makadar had initiated. Footsteps approached, and she turned to find Colonel Harris walking toward her, datapad in hand. "Captain," Harris acknowledged. "I thought I might find you here." Alex straightened. "Colonel, something I can help with?" "Actually, yes." Harris gestured to the empty space beside Alex. "May I?" "Of course." Harris joined her at the railing, setting her datapad aside. "I spent the afternoon reviewing mission recordings from Makadar, particularly your interactions with the militant leader Qadir." Alex waited, unsure where this was heading. "What I observed," Harris continued carefully, "doesn't align with General Harrington's characterization of emotional compromise. In fact, your engagement with Qadir displayed remarkable psychological insight and tactical adaptation. Coming from Harris, known for her by-the-book approach, this assessment carried particular weight." "Thank you, Colonel." "Though I suspect the General would disagree." Harris studied her for a moment. "The General represents a certain philosophy of combat leadership, one that values detachment as a virtue and views emotional intelligence as a liability." She paused. "I've subscribed to similar thinking throughout my career." "But," Alex prompted, sensing more. "But Makadar presents compelling evidence that this philosophy may have limitations in certain operational contexts." CapCut AI voice-ready text. Harris's admission seemed difficult but genuine. "Your approach achieved outcomes that conventional methods likely wouldn't have. That merits serious consideration, not dismissal." The Colonel's candor was unexpected. "I appreciate your willingness to reassess, ma'am. I'm an analyst by training, Captain. When evidence contradicts established thinking, intellectual honesty requires reevaluation." Harris retrieved her datapad. "Which brings me to the reason I sought you out. Central Command has fast-tracked the review of your methodology. They've requested you develop a formal training framework incorporating the psychological dimensions of your approach." Alex absorbed this with measured surprise. They want to institutionalize methods that Harrington considers compromised by emotion. What Harrington considers emotional, others are beginning to recognize as advanced empathetic intelligence with tactical applications. Harris's lips curved in a rare smile. Politics aside, success like Makadar demands serious examination. As Harris departed, leaving Alex with the datapad containing the preliminary framework request, the full implications began to sink in. The very qualities that had been deemed liabilities, her empathetic understanding, her refusal to accept civilian casualties as necessary collateral, her recognition of psychological complexity in combat situations, were now being considered as potential tactical innovations worth codifying. The irony wasn't lost on her. For years, she had carried the burden of being too emotional for combat, only to discover that this supposed weakness, properly channeled, constituted a strength that conventional doctrine had failed to recognize. The following morning brought further developments. Alex was summoned to a secure communication session with Central Command, where she found herself briefing senior leadership on the psychological aspects of the Makadar operation. The questions were pointed but genuinely curious, not challenging her methods, but seeking to understand their application and replicability. Captain Reeves, concluded General Mitchell, the Joint Special Operations Commander, your approach represents a potential paradigm shift in certain extraction scenarios. We'll be integrating elements of your methodology into advanced training protocols with your direct input. Consider this a priority assignment moving forward. After the briefing concluded, Commander Jackson approached with news that further underscored the shifting attitudes. You've received commendation from the Secretary of Defense, he informed her, handing over an official document. Direct recognition of your leadership in Makadar. Additionally, Central Command has officially redesignated your actions in Karachi from protocol violation to tactical innovation under extreme circumstances. The redesignation represented more than bureaucratic terminology. It was formal vindication of the decision that had derailed her career for years. The shadow of Karachi, which had followed her through every assignment and colored every professional interaction, was finally being lifted. There's more, Jackson added. The specialized extraction unit I mentioned is being fast-tracked. They're calling it Empathetic Response Team, ERTI. The name was deliberately chosen to emphasize the psychological dimension your approach brings to high-risk civilian scenarios. Alex processed this information with measured amazement. It's actually happening? Initial authorization for 3 teams, with potential expansion based on operational outcomes. Jackson studied her reaction. They want you to command the first team, develop the protocols, establish the training parameters. The opportunity represented everything she had been denied since Karachi, not just restoration to field operations, but the chance to institutionalize an approach that prioritized civilian protection through psychological insight rather than overwhelming force. When does it start? She asked simply. Training team assembly begins next week. You'll have significant input on personnel selection. Jackson smiled slightly. Though I understand Lieutenant Martinez and Sergeant Willis have already volunteered. As word of the new unit spread through Vanguard Point, Alex found herself approached by operators who had once viewed her with skepticism or outright dismissal. Many expressed interest in the ERT concept, drawn by the success they had witnessed in Makadar. The thing is, Captain, explained one veteran operator who sought her out, we've all been in situations where standard tactical approaches felt insufficient, especially with civilians involved. What you demonstrated, there's a need for that capability in our arsenal. By evening, Alex found herself in the unusual position of conducting an informal briefing for interested personnel, explaining the psychological dimensions of her approach that had proven so effective in Makadar. The key distinction, she explained to the gathered operators, isn't choosing emotion over tactical discipline. It's recognizing that empathetic intelligence can enhance tactical options rather than compromise them. Understanding human psychology, both civilian and hostile, creates opportunities that force alone cannot. As the discussion continued, Alex became aware of General Harrington standing at the back of the room, observing silently. His presence created a momentary tension, but she continued the briefing without acknowledging him directly. Only later, as the session concluded and operators dispersed, did Harrington approach her. His expression remained stern, but something in his demeanor had shifted subtly. "Captain," he acknowledged stiffly, "I understand congratulations are in order. Command of the new ERT unit is a significant responsibility." "Thank you, sir," Alex replied, maintaining professional courtesy despite their history. Harrington seemed to struggle with his next words. "While I maintain reservations about certain aspects of your methodology, I cannot dismiss the outcomes achieved in Makadar." It wasn't an apology, nor a full endorsement, but from Harrington, it represented a significant concession. "The operational landscape evolves, sir," Alex offered, neither confrontational nor deferential. "Sometimes new challenges require new approaches." "Perhaps," he acknowledged reluctantly, "though I still believe emotional detachment serves operational clarity in most combat scenarios." "With respect, General, I don't advocate for emotional reactivity, but for emotional intelligence as a tactical resource." Alex met his gaze directly. "The ability to understand and anticipate human behavior, both civilian and hostile, creates options that purely force-based approaches often miss." Harrington considered this, his expression thoughtful despite his evident discomfort with the concept. "Central Command seems convinced. The Secretary's commendation carries significant weight." "The results carry more weight, sir," Alex replied simply. 200 lives saved speaks to effectiveness, regardless of methodology. After a moment of tense silence, Harrington nodded curtly. "Develop your protocols, Captain. Train your teams. The operational outcomes will ultimately determine the value of your approach." As he turned to leave, he added something unexpected. "What happened in Karachi? The children you refused to sacrifice. I never disagreed with your objective. Only your willingness to compromise chain of command to achieve it." The admission, limited though it was, suggested that perhaps the gulf between their perspectives wasn't as absolute as it had seemed. "The chain of command exists to serve our core mission, sir. Sometimes remembering that mission requires difficult choices." Harrington didn't respond directly, but his expression suggested her words had landed. With a final nod, he departed, leaving Alex to reflect on how dramatically circumstances had changed in the span of a single day. From professional exile to unit command, from whispered criticism to official commendation, the transformation was almost dizzying. Yet what mattered most wasn't personal vindication, but the recognition that empathy and tactical excellence weren't opposing forces, but complementary ones. As she prepared to depart for Central Command to begin establishing the ERT framework, Alex received one final visit from a civilian representative of the hostages rescued in Makadar. The woman, a senior aid worker named Sarah Jensen, had requested the meeting through official channels. "Captain Reeves," Jensen began when they met in the base's reception area, "I've been selected by the hostages to convey our collective gratitude. What you and your team accomplished. There are no adequate words." Alex acknowledged this with a respectful nod. "I'm glad we could bring everyone home safely." "It was more than that," Jensen insisted. "The manner of the rescue, the care taken to minimize violence, the efforts to resolve the situation through engagement rather than just force. It made a profound difference not just in the outcome, but in how those who lived through it will carry the experience forward." This perspective, from someone who had experienced the operation from the hostage side, carried special significance. "In my years of humanitarian work," Jensen continued, I've observed that how people are treated during rescue can be almost as important as the rescue itself in their psychological recovery. Your approach showed respect for human dignity, even in the most desperate circumstances. As they concluded their meeting, Jensen handed Alex a small package. "From all of us," she explained. "A token of gratitude." Cap cut an iVoice-ready text later, alone in her quarters. Alex opened the package to find a simple medallion bearing the ancient medical symbol of the caduceus, with an inscription on the reverse, "To save with courage and compassion from the 200 who live because you refused to accept there was no other way." The inscription captured something essential about the journey that had brought her from the shadow of Karachi to the vindication of Makadar. The unwavering belief that courage and compassion weren't opposing forces in combat, but essential partners. As she packed her belongings for transfer to Central Command, Alex placed the medallion carefully in her uniform pocket. It would serve as a reminder of what was possible when tactical excellence was guided by the very quality that others had once dismissed as weakness: the profound commitment to preserving the lives entrusted to her care, not just as objectives, but as human beings worthy of every effort to bring them home safely. The journey ahead would bring new challenges, but the fundamental truth had been established beyond question. Alexandra Reeves wasn't too emotional for combat. She had simply understood, before others were ready to accept it. The highest form of courage sometimes required the heart to lead the way. 6 months after Makadar, the Joint Special Operations Training Facility at Fort Braxton hummed with focused activity. Inside the state-of-the-art simulation center, Captain Alexandra Reeves stood behind a glass observation panel, watching as the first fully trained empathetic response team ran through a complex hostage scenario. The integration of psychological tactics with traditional extraction methods was evident in their approach, not abandoning tactical discipline, but enhancing it with calculated human insight. "Blue Team, hostage group identified in Sector 4, came the calm voice of Lieutenant Martinez, now serving as Alex's second-in-command for ERC Alpha. "Psychological assessment indicates primary hostile displays hesitation patterns consistent with reluctant participation. Engage accordingly." Alex noted with approval how the team adjusted their approach based on the psychological profile, using specific language patterns and non-threatening postures designed to exploit the identified vulnerability without compromising tactical readiness. "Remarkable progress," observed Colonel Harris, who had become an unexpected ally in establishing the ERT program. 6 months ago, this approach was considered unorthodox at best, actively dangerous at worst. Now it's becoming doctrine. Not replacing traditional doctrine, Alex clarified, but complementing it for specific scenarios. "The key has been demonstrating that emotional intelligence isn't a compromise of tactical discipline, but an enhancement of it." The simulation concluded with a successful extraction. All hostages secured, minimal force applied, with the reluctant hostile effectively separated from more committed aggressors through psychological leverage rather than direct confrontation. As the team emerged for debriefing, Alex recognized the transformation in their approach. These were hardened operators who had initially viewed the ERT concept with skepticism, veterans of dozens of high-risk missions conducted according to traditional protocols. Now they moved with a different awareness, their tactical excellence augmented by psychological insight that created options where force alone would have fallen short. "Assessment, Lieutenant?" Alex asked as Martinez joined them. "Team integration of psychological tactics is at 90% effectiveness," he reported. The shift from viewing hostiles as uniform threats to recognizing individual psychological profiles has created multiple new tactical options. Operators are becoming adept at identifying exploitation opportunities without compromising security. "Protocols." Colonel Harris nodded with professional approval. "Central Command will be pleased." The Secretary of Defense is visiting next week to observe a live demonstration. The mention of such high-level interest would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier, when Alex's approach had been considered an anomaly at best, a dangerous deviation at worst. Now it represented a paradigm shift in how certain high-risk, civilian extractions were conceptualized. After the debriefing concluded, Alex found herself walking the perimeter of the training facility with Sergeant Willis, who had become one of ERT's most effective trainers. "Something on your mind, Sergeant?" she prompted, noting his thoughtful expression. "Just reflecting on how far we've come, ma'am," he replied. "When you first arrived at Vanguard Point, most of us thought the rumors about you being too emotional meant you were a liability." He shook his head. "Never imagined that same quality would become our greatest tactical advantage in certain scenarios. Not emotion itself," Alex clarified, "but the ability to understand it in ourselves, in hostages, in hostiles. That understanding creates options that force alone can't provide." Willis nodded. "That's what I've been trying to explain to my brother. He's conventional Army, can't quite wrap his head around how this approach works without compromising operational security." "It's a valid concern," Alex acknowledged. "The challenge has been demonstrating that empathetic intelligence and tactical discipline aren't mutually exclusive, that they can reinforce each other when properly integrated." Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of a junior officer. "Captain Reeves, secure communication from Central Command. Priority Alpha." Alex exchanged a glance with Willis before responding, "On my way." In the secure communications center, she found Colonel Harris already receiving the transmission, her expression grave as she motioned Alex to join her. "Captain," acknowledged General Mitchell from Central Command, his image clear on the secure video link. "We have a situation developing that requires immediate ERT deployment. American Embassy in Navalia has been seized by local insurrectionists. Initial reports indicate approximately 50 diplomatic personnel and civilian contractors are being held hostage. Navalia, a small but strategically significant nation experiencing political upheaval following disputed elections." Alex had been monitoring developments there as a potential flashpoint. "Current status, sir?" she asked, immediately shifting into operational mode. "Situation fluid and deteriorating," Mitchell replied. "Insurrectionist forces took control of the embassy compound 3 hours ago during a diplomatic reception. Local government forces have established a perimeter, but lack extraction capabilities. Intelligence suggests the hostage-takers are a mixed group, some hardened militants, others political activists who didn't anticipate this level of escalation." Alex processed this information, already formulating preliminary approaches. That psychological division creates potential leverage points. What are their demands? Release of political prisoners, international recognition of their faction as legitimate government, and safe passage to neighboring territory. Mitchell's expression indicated the political complexity. "State Department is attempting negotiation, but we need an extraction capability on site immediately. This is precisely the scenario ERT was designed for." "Understood, sir." "ERT Alpha can deploy within 2 hours." "Negative, Captain," Mitchell corrected. "You're not just sending Alpha Team. You're leading this operation personally." The directive caught Alex by surprise. "Sir?" "This situation has White House attention," Mitchell explained. "Given the diplomatic implications and civilian risk factors, they specifically requested ERT deployment under your direct command." The Secretary of Defense concurred. Colonel Harris interjected with practical considerations. "Operational parameters, General. Rules of engagement?" "Captain Reeves has full tactical authority once on site," Mitchell replied, the significance of such latitude not lost on anyone present. "Primary objective is extraction of all hostages with minimal casualties on either side. Political considerations make a bloodbath unacceptable, but protection of American personnel remains paramount. After the transmission ended, Harris turned to Alex. "They're placing extraordinary trust in your judgment, Captain. 6 months ago, you were considered too emotionally compromised for field operations. Now you're being handed operational authority for a crisis with international implications. Because they've recognized that what they called emotional compromise was actually tactical insight that traditional approaches missed." Alex replied, already mentally assembling the operational requirements. "Assemble ERT Alpha and Bravo. Full. Deployment protocols. We wheels up in 90 minutes. As the base erupted into organized activity, preparing for emergency deployment, Alex retreated briefly to the Tactical Planning Center to review everything available on the Navalian crisis. The embassy compound schematics, personnel files of diplomatic staff, intelligence assessments of the insurrectionist factions. Each piece formed part of the complex puzzle she would need to solve. Lieutenant Martinez found her there, already. "In deployment gear. Teams are preparing, Captain. Transport confirmed. What's our initial approach?" "We'll develop the full tactical plan during transit," Alex replied, not looking up from the intelligence briefings. "But I can already see potential psychological fault lines among the hostage takers. The hardliners will want to use violence to force concessions. The political activists will be increasingly uncomfortable with that approach. Our opportunity lies in that division. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.